Welcome to F1 Coffee Corner, Full Beans. I'm your host as always, Terry, and I'm here to keep you up to date with all of the unbiased, hard-hitting Formula 1 news. So grab your favourite mug of coffee, sit down, strap in and get yourself comfortable to join in the conversation. Because this is F1 Coffee Corner. This is Full Beans, the must-have podcast for all Formula 1 fans. Welcome to this week's episode of F1 Coffee Corner, Full Beans the podcast. I'm your host as always, Terry, and I bring you all of the latest news from the Formula 1 paddock. And there is only one news story that is dominating this week, and that is, of course, Adrian Newey leaving Red Bull. So, without further ado, grab your coffee. Let's get right into this, because this is going to be so interesting over what is next for both Red Bull and Adrian Newey. Okay, so it's May the 1st. We've had the official announcement from Red Bull that Adrian Newey will be leaving Red Bull in the first quarter of 2025. Now, this has spiked quite a bit of confusion over exactly what is going on with Adrian and with regards to garden leave and seeing out his contract. Now, the way it's been done, it's in effect, Adrian Newey is effectively starting his garden leave from now. So he's stepping back from Formula 1 activities to therefore take part in the finishing of the RB17 hypercar project. And that will then leave him free to leave Red Bull Technology, which is where his contract's held, in the first quarter of 2025. So effectively this time next year, hence where the 12 months is coming from. He's starting it now. And in 12 months' time, he will be free to leave and then decide to do pretty much whatever he decides to do. Now, this is the thing. So a lot of people are thinking he's leaving Formula 1 to then work on the hypercar project. The wording of the statement is a bit clunky in that sense. It doesn't make it abundantly clear what's going on. But that is effectively what's happening. So his gardening leave is effectively being carried out whilst finishing off the RB17. Now, this is a project that he's already started. It's due to be completed towards the end of this year, with production and delivery starting back end of this year and delivery next year. There's only, I think, 50 of these road cars being produced. So, in fact, I don't even think it's a road car. It's a hypercar, isn't it? So whichever way you look at it, whether it's road car worthy or not, I'm not entirely sure. I haven't delved into the RB17, but either way, it's due for completion by next year, hence why he's staying until then. This is a two-way thing, I feel, from Red Bull. A lot of talk about why have they let this happen? Why is he allowed to go and do this? I think that this is Red Bull's cost cap that has come back to, excuse the pun, bite him in the ass. Now, we know that to circumnavigate the cost cap, a lot of the top teams, and not just Red Bull, a lot of the top teams are using various different methods to charge out their wages and their costs to keep them under the cost cap. And Red Bull are obviously no different to any of the Formula 1 teams in doing so. Now, when the whole sort of cost cap saga came out a few years ago, I don't want to go into that because there's no need to rake over it. In essence, it was later discovered that it seems that Red Bull are contracting Adrian rather than Adrian working for Red Bull. So a slightly different wording around where his contract's held. Now, what this probably allowed Red Bull to do, from looking at it from the outside, is keeping his costs separate from the actual cost cap. So allowing him to not be included as one of those top three earners, and also allow him to earn a substantial amount of money whilst doing other projects and not declaring it on the cost cap while he's doing non-Formula 1 related projects like the RB17 project. I think that what this has now done is it's enabled Adrian a get out. Now, we know his good friend and manager Eddie Jordan has been negotiating on his behalf and seems to have, come up with a pretty damn good deal, if I'm being honest. The thought of Adrian Newey leaving Red Bull in 2025 without having to serve any garden leave is pretty much unthinkable from what we would have thought a few years ago. And, making a video on it this week, certainly the, veracity of the comments of being told that you're wrong and that it's going to be 2028 before he's in the car, or 2027 at least before he can design a car. There's a bit of satisfaction of being right on it. Always is, let's be honest. But from a point of view, it's obviously to do with this workaround that was put in because of the cost cap that has now enabled Adrian to get out of it. So what we're seeing is he's going to attend races up until the end of this season. In that will be a support, because he will be supporting Red Bull with the RB20. and he will be supporting the development of the parts for potentially next year. Now, the reason why this isn't such a big issue is, number one, you can't start designing in real earnest in terms of the 2026 car until January 2025. So what you've got is this embargo that was introduced by the FIA to make it a level playing field to stop teams like Red Bull, who have such an advantage locked in, starting development early. So you can't actually physically do any computer design, as we discussed before on the show, or any wind tunnel runs until January 2025 for your 2026 car. Now, with new engines, new regulations, it's fair to say that Adrian just won't be doing any work on this whatsoever, and we spend what time he's not supporting Red Bull at the races, working on the RB17 project. This obviously ticks the box contractually as well, because he's contractually obliged to deliver the RB17 hypercar project. So from a contract point of view, that's obviously what Red Bull have done, is made sure they're holding to that as well, which is absolutely fair enough. Why wouldn't they do that? It's something which they've been, publicised and advertising. It would be almost criminal to let Adrian go before that project's come to fruition. So there's obviously a contractual thing around it as well. Now, what they haven't announced is what time of the year in 2025 that Adrian can leave. The first quarter is pretty vague, isn't it? It can go from January all the way to April in essence. So we're assuming it's going to be May next year. However, it may not be. It may be earlier, depending on what the agreement is with Red Bull. And we might hear a bit more of that coming out. In terms of the future for Adrian and what it looks like, I do genuinely think it's a straight sort of toss-up between two options at the moment. One is to go to Ferrari, and two is to retire. We know that Aston Martin have made a huge, big money offer to Adrian, but we're also hearing that Adrian's not really that interested in joining Aston Martin. We also hear that there's a potential of Mercedes, but from what we're hearing, that's not really an option. That's not really on the table. Certainly, I've heard nothing personally that makes me think in any way whatsoever that Adrian is going to leave to go to Mercedes at all. McLaren, he's already been there, done that. I don't believe that's a deal. And if you listen to Zach Brown talking just a couple of days ago when this speculation started rising, he talked about how he's happy with the team and how he's good friends with Adrian, but he doesn't see Adrian fitting into their current structure. So again, I really don't see that happening. So I do think we've got this straightforward Ferrari or quitting. That's it. That's what it is. So with regards to what Adrian can do, it seems with Eddie Jordan's help, this negotiation has put it firmly in his hands. So whatever deal Adrian decides to do, whether or not he decides to take delivery of that massive oyster sailing boat that we've been hearing so much about in terms of his collaboration with them and sailing it around the world, which we know is one of his dreams that he wants to do. He could well do that, or he could throw one last chance at the dice as such at Ferrari. We also know that he's spoken in the past about, one, not wanting to move to Maranello, but two, the lure of Ferrari and working with Ferrari. And also Fernando and Lewis are two people he said he regrets not being able to work with in terms of drivers. And obviously Ferrari or Aston Martin would tick a box on both these fronts. So it all depends on what Adrian decides to do. I don't think that money is a factor in this at all. I think that Adrian is purely going to base this next move on what he wants to do and obviously what his wife and family want to do. He talks a lot about not wanting to uproot and go to Maranello, but we do know there's, since COVID hit, there's so much you can do virtually working from home, satellite working. There are various options, and I'm pretty sure that Ferrari would open every single one of those options to Adrian to try and convince him to come on board. So I don't think that door's shut. There's been no announcement of it, but he's also stopped short of saying he's retiring as well. So I think that that's also key, that Adrian's not said in his statement he's retiring. So I generally think it's a, sitting on the fence, waiting to see which way it goes. We know that Fred Vasseur is keen to secure Adrian. I mean, everybody in Formula One is going to be keen to secure Adrian. Eddie Jordan's phone must be blowing up right now with people ringing it. Let's be perfectly honest about it. But with regards to Fred Vasseur, we know that he didn't fly out to Miami. We've been told that he actually flew to London to hold talks with Adrian. I'm pretty sure that no deal has been done yet, hence why we've not had an announcement. I do believe it's in the negotiating stages. I think the first part was to secure his release from Red Bull, which obviously has now been done. It's now been communicated. Everyone knows the timeline. Everyone knows where they're going. It means that Adrian would start work late on a 2026 car. However, it's not actually that late. We're talking April, maybe even earlier, like I said, because it does say just Q1. So you can get that development time back. You could either just start with the basics between January and April and wait for Adrian to come on board, or likewise, you could just halt your development until Adrian comes on board and just double down on it. Because remember, your wind tunnel development and also your computer designs are for the year. So it doesn't matter what point in the year you actually start doing that development. They could quite easily just hold off everything until Adrian comes on board, which I'm sure if Ferrari do manage to secure Adrian services, that is definitely one option they'll be taking. So with regards to Red Bull, what does it mean now? Now, the one thing I do want to touch on from this one is there's quite a loss of, there's a set of fans, and I use this word fans loosely when I talk like this, because it really bugs me, who are being very disrespectful over what Adrian's achieved with Red Bull, certainly recently. Talking about how he was working on the RB17 project full time and how he's not developed the current cars and how it's all Pierre Wache and actually they're not going to miss Adrian. And the one thing I will say to that is that's complete and utter bullshit, isn't it? Let's be honest about it. You wouldn't pay Adrian Newey in the region of £10 million a year for him to just design a hypercar project and not have an involvement in a Formula One car. Now, I will say that likes of Pierre Wache are extremely talented engineers, and Adrian has managed to build an extremely talented and diverse group around him in terms of development for Red Bull, as he stepped away from the day-to-day running of the Formula One design and moved into these other projects. So, yes, Adrian is not as actively involved in designing the Formula One car as he would have been a few years ago. However, to suggest that he's not had, virtually no input or little input is really disrespectful. He would have been there as someone who bounced ideas, who would have come up with solutions, who certainly probably would have led the design team in terms of what he feels should be the overarching principles that a car is designed to do. So I don't believe that sort of talk that he won't be missed. Far from it. I think Adrian will be missed. And it's quite telling that if you look at McLaren and Williams, both teams who have lost Adrian's services, look at their downfall. Just look at exactly how fast they declined. And with the exception of maybe 1-2 championships, didn't win championships once Adrian's left. And that has to be a real big worry if you're a Red Bull fan. And also Max Verstappen, we know that Mercedes are caught in Max. We know that there's money being thrown at Max Verstappen as they look for a replacement for Lewis. Toto's seen a chink in the armour of Red Bull with obviously what's happened with Christian and now what's happened with Helmut Marko in terms of him potentially being at risk, and then that sort of contract clause we heard about. And now, of course, Adrian Newey. Toto's, he's a bit like a shark circling. He's sniffing blood in the water, and he thinks he can pull Max to safety with the law of Mercedes and a Mercedes powertrain engine in 2026, that he will quite openly sort of probably try and state is going to be better than a Red Bull powertrain that's completely unproven. Now, that's not to say that they're not going to get it right. Red Bull powertrains have got massive investment in their new engine, the inclusion of Ford in terms of the electronic side of it, and also the engineers they've got. They took on a lot of the Honda powertrain people when they announced they were leaving Formula One, and they also poached a lot of people from Mercedes. So it's not a team in terms of Red Bull powertrains who are lacking in terms of expertise and the ability to build a good engine. Far from it. So I don't believe that it's going to be a massive difference, but it will be a difference. And Toto is using that to his advantage with all talk of ambassador roles and talk of, this huge eye-watering money offer, which I know Max isn't motivated by money. I think that's been proven. However, when drivers of money talk and the opportunity to potentially go and earn a lot of money with the option to maybe do something a little bit different, and with what's going on at Red Bull, with the breakup of this dream team and such. Now, I'm pretty sure that Red Bull will promote Pierre Wache. I'm pretty sure that Wache will go up and he will be announced as the new chief technical officer, and it will be business as usual for Red Bull in terms of the Formula One team. But no one can deny that there's been this battle behind the scenes. No one can deny there's been quite clearly stuff being played out by Red Bull. Whichever side of the fence you fall on in terms of what's happened, there's clearly been in the background this huge falling out between owners, between the team, between key figures, all since Dietrich passed away. Now, Dietrich kind of, he kind of was the glue that held together. And it seems that since he was, since he left us and he died, then actually Red Bull has almost been since then on this sort of collision course with people and the way the business is run and the way the business is going to be run going forward. We know that Red Bull in Austria implemented this board structure that Christian himself is not a fan of. We know that there's now someone to answer to, whereas in the past they just answered to Dietrich completely themselves. So, yeah, it's really tough, isn't it? It's one of those where people are saying Christian Horner should have done more, should have been better. People are saying that whether or not it's his fault that this is a downfall of Red Bull, it all remains to be seen. I do think Max will be looking at options. I think it's sensible for Max to look at options. He's under no obligation to stay. I don't know what this does in terms of contracts for Max. I don't know if there's any clauses relating to Adrian in terms of get out clauses. We know that there's a marker clause in there. Whether or not there's an Adrian clause in there, I don't know. We've also heard some whispering from sources within Red Bull that a lot of people are now looking at this as maybe an option to look at their own career and what they're doing. So this could start an exodus. It could be a singular one. It could be lots of different scenarios for Red Bull. But one thing is for sure, there's some really interesting times in Red Bull going forward, and some real interesting times in terms of what this looks like for Formula One in general, because Adrian is regarded as the most successful designer of all time. And if the deal is right for him, he might just be able to, scratch that final itch of working with Lewis and Ferrari, and maybe just turn around the fortunes of those prancing horses. I, for one, can't wait to see where Adrian Newey goes next. If you want my opinion and my money, it's on Ferrari. I think the law's going to be too much. I think that Adrian will want the opportunity to do it. It's the only engine manufacturer that he's never won a championship with. He will literally have the full set. It will be like Thanos collecting the Infinity Stones if he goes to Ferrari and wins the championship. And it presents him with the opportunity to give Lewis Hamilton title number 8 as well, which all of that combined, I think might just be too much to stop Adrian sailing off into the sunset just yet, and maybe just putting that boat on hold for another couple of years yet before he decides to see that. But either way, it's exciting times in Formula One. The off-season action has been better than the on-track action this season. Silly season this year has certainly made up for a silly season last year, which was non-existent. Yeah, we had 1st of February, we had Lewis announcing he's going to Ferrari. 1st of May, we've got Adrian Newey leaving Red Bull. Two things that we did not think for 1 minute would happen at the start of the season have happened. Ferrari feel like they're just playing Formula One fantasy at the moment. Formula One manager, where Fred Vasseur is just going on his computer screen and picking up who he wants whenever he wants. Doing an amazing job at the rebuilding. John Alkin has got to be praised for the way he's getting back behind Fred Vasseur, the way he's backed all the behind the scenes moves that Fred's been making, all of the action that's been going on that's not been on the track. I know there's a lot of talk about the way that the Carlos situation has been handled and the sort of, the doubts over leading to Carlos being replaced by Lewis. But I think Lewis is like Max. I think there's certain drivers, Fernando I'll put in that bracket, that they're sort of 3 drivers who, 4 when you include Charles Leclerc into that, 5 if you include Lando into that. I think there's like a selection of drivers within Formula One that if they become available, you pretty much get the checkbook out and go and try and sign them if you can. If you find out they're on the market, you're in there for it. And I think that's exactly what's happened with Ferrari and Lewis. Lewis has become available and John Alkin's gone, do you know what? I'm going to go get my man. And unfortunately, I've only got 2 seats and Carlos is the one to lose out on that one. Talking about what's going on then. So in terms of the other news in Formula One, let me sip some coffee and let's get on with that. So, other news in Formula One, the big one has to be Nico Hülkenberg signing with Sauber. Now, Nico Hülkenberg signing with Sauber is a massive move for himself, really. So, he will become an Audi driver. It's a multi-year contract. It's been confirmed. He will drive for Sauber next year, and he will then go into Audi when they join in 2026. We're all expecting potentially Carlos Sainz to go with him. Carlos, I feel, is a driver whose options are fast running out. I think that in terms of what's left for him, Mercedes is a short-term deal, which I'm not sure that Carlos wants to do. I think he wants some long-term security. And if that's off the table, I don't believe he's going to Red Bull unless Max moves elsewhere. But even if Max goes elsewhere, I can't see Max going anywhere before 2026 myself. So whether or not Carlos is a 1-year stopgap at Mercedes and then tries to get the seat at Red Bull if Max signs for Mercedes, lots of if buts and maybes. And I feel that, I saw some, I think the race put an article out about it takes the pressure off Carlos. And I get what I'm saying, but I also think it might add to the pressure because time's running out. And I feel that Audi are going to get impatient. They've got a established driver, Nico Hülkenberg. Yes, he's not as marketable or I'll probably say as good as Carlos Sainz. I know some people might come at me in the comments for that one. due to the fact he's probably just not had the right car at the right time. But I do believe that Carlos Sainz is a better prospect having in your team to get points, podiums, potentially wins if your car's any good, than what Nico Hülkenberg would give you. So I think their preference would still be Carlos, but also feel that there's enough drivers on the grid to fill that second spot for Sauber if they're not happy to wait for Carlos. So I do think it's a bit of a dangerous game. I do feel that his next move is probably critical to what he does. It reminds me a bit of Daniel Ricciardo's move away from Red Bull in terms of how it can just go downhill. In terms of Daniel Ricciardo, there's been a lot of talk about replacing him. I still stand by what I said. I don't think that Daniel Ricciardo is going to be replaced early doors. I think that it will be looked at the end of the season. He's got great commercial value. We saw another Hugo deal being announced this week. We saw, the stuff that goes with it. Marketability-wise, he's a good deal for Visa Cash App RB. So I feel they'll stay with him until the end of this season and then they'll reevaluate it then. We know they've potentially penciled in Liam Lawson for a seat. This is going to prove a problem unless they're willing to put Yuki on the sidelines for 12 months, knowing that he's most likely going to follow Honda to Aston Martin to partner Fernando Alonso. Is a smart money bet with that one. With Lance Stroll maybe going over to do some WEC or something different after 2025. Whether or not they do that, I don't know. Whether or not they make Liam wait another year on the sidelines. I'm fully expecting Checo to get a new contract, even if it's only a 1-year contract. I'm fully expecting that one to go through. In terms of Haas, we're expecting Ollie Behrman to be announced as Nico Hülkenberg's driver. Nico Hülkenberg's replacement. The one thing I will say on this, I think that given the choice, I think that Haas would have preferred to have kept Hülkenberg over Magnussen. And what this now does is now plays into the realm of what do they do with that second seat, because if they go with Ollie Behrman, they're going to have a rookie in there. They're going to want some experience to balance that out. We know that they've talked in the past when they run with two rookies with Schumacher and Mazepin that actually they didn't really feel that was the best for business. It was good for sponsorship in terms of the injection of money, but not good for actual, getting points and getting results. So I do feel they're one experienced driver to go alongside Ollie Behrman if that's the route they go down, which obviously Kevin Magnussen fits that bill. What could happen though is we could end up with a driver market where actually some drivers that maybe in the past were out of Haas's reach are now potentially in Haas's reach. And by that, I mean people like Valtteri Bottas, Zhou Yu is another one. These drivers, even the Alpine drivers may potentially come as an option for Haas, considering where they are in the championship and considering where some of their competitors and rivals are. So it's going to be really interesting to see what they do at second seat, because if things get expected and someone like Valtteri Bottas leaves, Sauber, for example, for next season, Valtteri Bottas is a good signing for a team, especially a team in the lower half of the grid. Proven race winner, great results when he's got the car behind him, been unlucky with how the car's been at Sauber. So I think that actually someone like Haas are probably worth waiting on their driver announcements before they even go all in with their announcements. And this may be where Ollie Behrman misses out, actually, because do they bring someone like Valtteri Bottas in? Do they bring someone like Pierre Gasly, even Esteban Ocon? All these drivers who are lower down may be looking over their shoulder and thinking, this is a better option, Ferrari power, Ferrari parts, performing quite well, middle of the pack. Actually, like the way what Komatsu's doing with the team, could Haas be a team that is playing the driver market without realising it? And I for one feel that could be key to the next move. Like I say, drivers who may not have been available in the past are suddenly going to become available to Haas. Obviously, Williams, Logan Sargent, we're fully expecting Logan Sargent to be replaced at the end of this season, if not before. There was some speculation about Kimi Antonelli replacing him after the Miami Grand Prix for Imola. I don't see it myself. I don't see why the FIA would issue a super license for Kimi early. We know he's got enough points, but he's already 18 in August, so I don't feel why they would kind of set a precedent of issuing a license early at 17 when they could just wait till August anyway. So I feel that even if he was to be replacing Logan Sargent, it wouldn't happen until the summer break and until he turns 18. So I think that one's kind of wide of the mark. We know that Kimi's obviously been testing the cars. So he recently, just this week, did the W13 around Imola. A lot of talk about lap times. Completely pointless looking at his lap times. You don't know what fuel he was running on. You don't know what the condition of the tyres are. We know the compound were hard tyres, but they're always special ones that Pirelli put on. They're not the same as the race tyres. And also, we don't know what fuel was being run, what setup was being being done. The car has been developed since then in terms of the W13. When it ran in Imola a couple of years ago, I think it was only Daniel Ricciardo back in 2022, I want to say, run the W13 around Imola in terms of hard tyres. So even the Mercedes cars didn't run on hard tyres, if I remember rightly, in terms of competitiveness. So it'd be really hard to put a sort of gauge on Kimi's lap times, even though we have seen them. The one thing I will say about Kimi's lap times, amazingly consistent for such a young driver, literally right on the money in terms of, that actual time he was setting. So one thing I will say is whatever he's doing, he was doing it consistently and within a few tenths on each lap. So he was clearly comfortable with that pace he was setting. Whether or not it's enough to get him a seat remains to be seen. I still think a lot of this hinges on Max and what's going on with that one. I think that Toto is happy, as I've said many times on here, to play this waiting game. I think that he can relax, take a step back. If he can get Max, happy days. If not, he's got Kimi. If not, he's got Carlos. He's in a great position of strength at the moment. He's in a position where he can just literally sit back, play this driver market, as we said, see how it pans out. He could even go as far as bring someone like Valtteri back. He could go get Esteban Ocon to do a short job for him if he needs someone for only a year. So yeah, I think the driver market's still got a lot to play for. I feel that Red Bull and Mercedes are probably the key players before we see the rest of the grid knock into effect. But I also think there are some drivers who are taking opportunities and just snapping them up and saying, right, actually, let's get this deal done and get it over the line. Hulkenberg clearly had a deal and was like, I'm signing that before someone changes their mind. So fair play to Nico Hulkenberg. It's going to be good to see. It's going to be interesting to see. And I really can't wait to see what he can do in that Audi when it comes. I think next year is going to be a little bit difficult for him. I'm interested to see his teammate. I'm intrigued to see who that is. My money would still be on someone like, Valtteri Bottas staying there maybe if Carlos doesn't go there, but it remains to be seen. I've been wrong before. But yeah, the big news from Formula One has to surely be Adrian Newey leaving Red Bull. He will leave in the first quarter of 2025. His garden leave is being served currently, and at that point, he will be free to decide on his future and where he goes. And that is your F1 Coffee Corner Espresso News. The next bit I want to touch on just very quickly is obviously May the 1st, Ayrton Senna. 30 years ago today that we lost Ayrton Senna, obviously on the back of Roland Ratzerberger yesterday as well, in terms of the anniversary of his death also. I've been a fan for over 30 years without disclosing my age live on social media and on podcasts. But I was well and truly old enough to remember that fateful weekend in Imola. And, it started badly with obviously Ruben Barrichello's crash, and then obviously Roland Ratzerberger's tragic accident, and then the decision to carry on racing, and then obviously Ayrton Senna. It was a dark weekend for the sport. It's probably the darkest one. It's a weekend which, if you watched it live, will stay with you. It's a weekend that before the modern day editing that we have on terms of television footage, nowadays, that when Formula One has a crash, they actually cut away from the scene until they know everything's right before they then go back in. Max Verstappen at Silverstone, prime example of that one, when obviously him and Lewis come together and he hit the wall at 50G. They waited until he was ready before they then go back and show the footage and the recovery of the car and Matt's getting out of the car. So there's a conscious effort that Formula One broadcasting do now, which is really good. 30 years ago, we didn't have that, and we ended up watching this horror unfold on both qualifying and on the race day itself. And, you remember the helicopter view from above, you remember the sheeting trying to go around, the sort of bits of blood that was on the track, and they're trying to get him out and trying to save him. And they are memories that are truly etched. And I'm not a fan of Imola, and I know it's to do with that. I don't enjoy when we go racing there at all. I'm pretty sure it's because it stirs up those early memories. And the one thing I will say about what's happened today with Adrian Newey is I don't believe that Adrian would have wanted his future announced on the anniversary of Ayrton Senna's death. And I do feel that that's something which, when I read Andrew Benson's column yesterday, he talked about that we wouldn't get talk of Adrian until Thursday, until after Ayrton Senna's services and stuff have passed away. They're doing commemorative services in Imola. We were all expecting it to come Thursday. It's happened today. I don't think that's Adrian's doing at all. I don't think he's going to be happy about it, if I'm honest. We know how Ayrton's death affected, Adrian is the designer, affected Frank Williams, his team principal, Patrick Head. You've only got to look back on interviews since then of what happened to Ayrton and sort of their role in it in terms of how it made them feel and how it was their car that obviously had that fateful crashing, and the subsequent stuff that went after that. It was a really bad time for Formula One at the time, and I know that having done the Williams tour when we were there for the race experience just this season, just that poignant to seeing Ayrton's car just sort of sat there, which obviously wasn't one from Imola, was one from one of the races beforehand. But even so, to see that last Williams car that Ayrton Senna drove in was quite sort of a choking moment, and certainly one that stayed with me as a fan for so many years. So 30 years with obviously Roland, Ratzerberger and Ayrton Senna. Like I say, it's amazing the strides we've made in safety, and it's a shame that it normally stems from a tragedy that we make these strides in safety. But unfortunately, that's the nature of things. And I know that, the FIA and Formula One have done some amazing things in technology. And obviously, since Jules passed away, the introduction of the Halo have saved numerous lives since then. So at least the one thing we can all say is that when something tragic like this has happened, at least the sport has been able to improve and learn on what happened and do their best to limit. You'll never eliminate exactly what the risk is, but we should always try and do our best to eliminate that risk. And I think that Formula One does a pretty good job nowadays of eliminating as much of that as it can. It never eliminates it entirely, we know that, but actually it does a pretty good job of that one. But that's just a personal thing from me on obviously Ayrton's death, having watched it live. I remember sitting there with Dad watching it, and it was just an awful weekend. And we go racing. Quite poignant that we're in a race week, interestingly. So Ayrton would have wanted us to race, and we are into Miami and our second sprint weekend. So without further ado, I'm going to sip on this coffee and let's get the Miami preview up. Right, so back to the book. Let's see. So for those who don't know, this is from the Formula One 2024 book from Bruce Jones. It's available now from all good stockists, and this gives you all the tracks in terms of the information, all the winners from last year, a review of last year, some great photos, some great info on it, and is really handy. So let's have a read through this one. So Miami. There are many things that mark out this circuit, and its location in the car park of Miami's Hard Rock Stadium is the first of these. The second is it's unusual in that its course is anti-clockwise, putting it very much in the minority of those visited by the World Championship. The lap starts with a tight right where drivers weigh at the risk of trying to gain a place or two on the opening laps of the race before feeding directly into an S's. Then continuing to arc to the right, the drivers are able to accelerate into 7th gear before running through a left-right SA sweep. Their pace is then slowed by a 3rd gear turn 7, where the track changes direction and feeds into a high-speed run. The fastest point of the lap comes on the approach to turn 11, the beach south, where cars can even exceed 200 miles per hour. After accelerating hard all the way from the exit at turn 7 and carrying as much momentum as possible through the sweeping twists in between, then the lap takes on a very different nature as it runs through a sequence of 6 low-speed corners, with the left-right chicane at turn 14 breaking the flow even further. Turn 16 is a 90-degree left-hander, and it feeds the cars onto the lap's longest straight where they can get close to 200 miles per hour. And like into turn 11, passing is a possibility into the hairpin at turn 17. The lap is then completed by a sweep through 2 open corners onto the start-finish straight. Like many a temporary circuit, the track surface can be bumpy, and this has so far made finding a good setup very tricky for the teams. Now, in terms of setup, we are obviously in the new setup of the new sprint format, so that means you can make changes after the sprint race itself. So we got the same as what we had in China, in Shanghai. So what we've got is on Friday, we'll see FP1, And then we will see the start of sprint qualifying, which will be the start of Part Ferme. Then on Saturday morning, we will see the sprint race itself take place, then the end of Part Ferme, and then Part Ferme will be reopened again for qualifying for Saturday in the afternoon, ready for the race itself on Sunday. So you can make a setup change between the sprint race and qualifying to get the most out of your car. Now, you can also do what Mercedes did and get it completely wrong. Now, they obviously changed the setup on Lewis Hamilton's car after the sprint in Shanghai, and they completely messed it up, and they went backwards after it. So that is a warning to people to just watch out, really, because even though you can change it, and even though it is a possibility, it might also hinder you, and it might just go against you like that one did. So there's certainly be worries about that one. In terms of upgrades, we're expecting new floors of some sort from Mercedes. We're expecting McLaren to bring upgrades. Red Bull haven't got anything substantial. Maybe a few track-specific ones, but we're not even hearing a lot of that. And McLaren and the other team are bringing upgrades in terms of the top teams as well. So there are some upgrades coming to the teams. This is on the back of that change to Part Ferme you can make. And obviously making sure the wind tunnel correlation is right before the first big upgrade of the season, which will be Imola. So, yeah, interesting. Can't wait to see that one. That's what we're looking at. In terms of the track itself, we got, I believe, the C2, the C3, the C4 compound tyres is what we're seeing on that one. And we're going to have, let me just check the stats up here. We've got 5.412 kilometers, 57 laps, race distance of 308.326 kilometers, and a lap record from Max Verstappen set in 2023 of 1 minute 29.708. So all to play for in Miami. Last race before we head for the big upgrade in Imola and the start of the European Tour. Sprint race, lots on offer. My money is on Red Bull, Ferrari, McLaren, and then I think Aston Martin and Mercedes will be fighting amongst the best. But Aston Martin improving me a bit wrong at the moment, and Fernando is looking a bit handy in that AMR 24. So, yeah, with that in mind, that's it from the F1 Coffee Corner this week. Hope you've enjoyed it. Bit of a long one on Adrian Newey, but when someone like Adrian leaves, it's quite right that we give it the respect it deserves and delve into where he's going to end up next. But if he doesn't choose retirement, one thing's for sure, Adrian's going to Maranello, I think. Right, catch you all soon. Have a great week. Enjoy the race. In terms of me, what am I up to? I'm up to some things coming up, which is quite exciting. So May is going to be the start of a good month for me. So I am starting off this weekend. I will be at Silverstone for the Miami rooftop party on top of the Silverstone Hotel once again. Went there last year, really good event. Hopefully Dad can join me. He's currently away with work and trying to get to Silverstone. So fingers crossed that he can do that. I've also got a trip to the F1 Arcade in London, which was a competition win from Silverstone themselves. So I must thank Silverstone for that one. So I've got a pass to go and watch Imola from the F1 Arcade in London. I've done the one in Birmingham when it opened, never done the one in London. So really looking forward to a day out in London to watch the Imola race in a couple of weeks' time as well. And also I have got a night with Nigel Mansell lined up as well as part of Williams. They're doing an evening with Nigel Mansell celebrating his new book. So we get a copy of his new book and get to meet Nigel and listen to his stories. So that for me is huge. Yeah, Nigel Mansell was world champion while I was growing up alongside the likes of obviously, Ayrton, Senna, Michael Schumacher, but Nigel was certainly up there, and I'm absolutely stoked about the possibility of spending the evening talking to Nigel Mansell and meeting Nigel Mansell. So really looking forward to that one. And of course, experiencing the Williams Experience Centre once again. So yeah. And then we will head into June, July time, which for us will mean Silverstone. So less than 100 days now to go to Silverstone. And as a little teaser for you, that's not the only Grand Prix we're going to this year. That's right. I'm not going to tell you where just yet, but Dad and I have booked a second Grand Prix for this year. We are going to go abroad for the first time. So, yeah, can't wait for that one. And I can't wait to tell you where we're heading off to. But, yeah, we booked it at the weekend. So the flights are booked. And we are off to our first ever Grand Prix that isn't in the UK. So looking forward to that one immensely. And I can't wait to share that with you. Got some exciting news about the podcast coming up as well. By the time this drops, that should hopefully be out. If not, keep tuned on the social medias for that one. Just hit 6,000 followers on Instagram. So a huge shout out to anyone who is following. And that leads me into the lovely shameless plug at the end of this podcast, which is, of course, if you're not already, please hit that subscribe button, that follow button, whichever one's available to you on the platform you're listening to, because it helps me boost the podcast up. It helps other people get awareness of what this podcast is. I love bringing everyone the F1 Coffee Corner news. I love bringing the breaking news for everyone. And the more people we can share it with, the better. And we can carry on creating this environment where actually we just get good news no matter who you support, no matter where your team alliance is, no matter who your favourite driver is. What this is about is just delivering Formula One news in a way that's factual, that keeps everyone up to date and just gets rid of the rumour and the gossip and just gives you what exactly is going on. So, yeah, if you can, please share, please like, please follow, please do all of those things. I really appreciate it. If you're not already, and I know there's some American listeners who are a bit worried about TikTok bans. So if you are following from America and you follow me on TikTok, but not yet Instagram, please just drop me a follow on that one. The content is very similar, if not the same. It's not entirely the same. I do some a bit different, but if you happen to be somewhere where there's a risk of a TikTok ban and you haven't already, please head on over to Instagram. It's F1 Coffee Corner, same as it is on here. Hit that follow button, and then that way you won't miss out if something happens to TikTok in the States as well. So from me, a personal thank you. Hope you have a good week. Hope you enjoy Miami. I can't wait to tune in next time where I'll give you a rundown of what happened at the Miami watch party, whether or not I feel Silverstone was good value for money in terms of what you pay for the event and the room, etc., etc. And also our recap of the latest news and, of course, what goes down on the sprint in Miami. So without further ado, thanks for listening. Catch you all soon.